Hello and welcome to the Black Tower. I'm your host, your guide, your brother, Sorcerer Armana Soul. Uh, gonna go further with the All Things Necronomicon. This is gonna be part 12. Uh, there was a few details and a few things concerning the Necronomicon that I wanted to bring to light, maybe, kind of give better descriptions and explanations of. This is gonna be kind of in a three-part thing, okay? So the first one, let's talk about the Azanai of Shitu, the snake. Cancer. Well, my stone with the constellation. All right. Uh, so let's go into what this actually is. Okay, so its ruling planet is the moon. The moon is considered a feminine aspect over emotions and watery things, all sorts of things, menstruation, so forth and so on. But in this sense, it is going to be the ruler, not just because the ruling planet is the moon, but you have to understand that it represents the queen or the goddess or the feminine energies ruling by right of the will. Uh, and let me see if I can maybe explain that a bit better. The exalted planet is Jupiter. Jupiter represents uh, righteous rule, uh, judgment, law, so forth and so on, abundance, prosperity. You kind of get the drift. But Jupiter with the moon being the feminine, Jupiter being the masculine, when you mix the two, it is emotion being ruled, ruling, being what's in control, empowered by the masculine. Uh, and so, in this sense, now I had a bunch of notes here, represents the queen goddess ruling, being backed by the king god, the emotions ruling via the will, and, but another thing to think about with the Azanai of Cancer or the snake, Shitu, is in the symbolism of the snake. I was telling you last month with the video concerning the Azanai, uh, the viper, and its dual meaning and its poisoning the twins and so forth and so on. Well, the snake literally has a separate, altogether different meaning than over a viper, even though they're both serpents. The snake itself represents the shedding and evolution, the evolution of the soul, of the self, of the psyche of the individual. Uh, this having been done, then it is a continuous thing. It is something that should never stop. Most times it doesn't. If you are an active participant in your own evolution, it will then be, a constant in your life. But if you're one of those, couch potatoes, no pun intended on being on my couch, but if you're one of those people that just doesn't take an active participation in your own evolution, you're going to find it harder to connect with this type of energy. Because, see, in the Western Zodiac, they show the crab, which is just hard-shelled thing, pinchers. It can defend itself. Actually, its best defense is its hardened shell, okay? And because it is a creature of the water, that's where the symbolism came in, because it is a creature of the sea. But so, too, were snakes in the ancient days, because anytime they were showing them, you think you step outside in the yard and you see like you run across a rattlesnake or a copperhead or, grass snake or anything of this nature. Uh, all snakes, well, all living things drink water and so forth and so on. And snakes are no different. And snakes in the ancient times came from the waters. They kept seeing it coming from the waters, coming from the waters, coming from the waters. Whether it was because they were swimming across from shore to shore or whatever. And that's how the snake became symbolic of, in the Necronomicon Simon tradition, as opposed to the crab. Because, a lot of times, uh, these snakes were seen coming from the river. Yes, they abound on the land as well, but because of their ability to travel through water, their connection with water became apparent. Now, whether this is a real true thing or whether I'm just speaking out my ass, this comes from my own personal understanding, my own gnosis of it, so forth and so on. If you disagree, that's cool, you know. Because I don't think that in a system like this, I don't think that there's any one person that has all the say, that has all the words, all the rules, and all this, that, and the other. I think that it's an individualistic journey. But this is my 2 cents on the Shitu. All right. So let's get on to the next thing. Now, like I said, I've been having to do notes on this. I promised that I would go over the Firik and Pirik, the ministers. All right, so let's go over my notes first here real quick. The ministers of knowledge, the twin serpents or snakes that are entwined upon the wand of Ningazita, referred to as Geed. Protectors of the arcane faith, or those who work the magic of the Necronomicon, the most secret knowledge. The guiding spirits that are set over the book itself. The wand's central piece is referred to as Geed, or G-I-D, Gid, Geed. So the serpents would then be Firik and Pirik of Geed, or as the twin serpents of the central column, which is a reference to the will of the practitioner, so they then support or minister to the individual. Like with the Simon Necronomicon, you pick it up, it is a living thing, and there is a spirit attached to it. Well, in this sense, it's spirits. It's Pirik and Firik. When you think of these twin serpents upon the column, the easiest way to look at this is the serpents of the Kundalini. They are the exact same thing. They are the awakened and the awakener. But they also represent air and water. Even though they have like a fiery essence or whatever because of what they are. But they actually represent air and water, or thought and emotion. And here's why. Because through thought, all things are known. Through emotion are thoughts given the power. And in this sense, this is where the concept of them as ministering spirits come in. Now, I've got a lot of things to go over. So, this may be short. I can't believe this is actually going faster than what I imagined it would be. I still have a knowledge lecture that I plan on recording and putting out there. So, hopefully you'll make it for that one. So let's go in the Necronomicon. Inanna descended into the underworld and was tortured, beaten, and taken captive, and was slain. Enki, the beloved of Inanna, created 2 elemental spirits, Kurgaru, Kalaturu. Now it's interesting that when you take these words, and anybody who has studied ancient languages, Mesopotamian languages, things of this nature, the word itself, the name itself, has hidden meanings. Like Kurgaru, there is an inflection of Kur, which could be a connection to the mountain of sunset in the west, or of the underworld. And it could also be Kurga, which would then be a being's name of some sort. And then Aru, R was the name of the plow sign. The Big Dipper, which has also been known as the scythe. So you can take into account all these different things about the name and about the secret meanings of names. You can take this into account. But in my own personal research, study, channeling and of gnosis and things, Kurgaru, the spirit of earth, the seeds of grain, food of life. And Kurgaru was the spark of life within the grain. Because when you think of a grain or a seed, there's something powerful inside it that actually allows it to grow. And so the spark of life within the grain could be this living spirit, this elemental spirit of Kurgaru. Now, I'm only going to be able to do this with Kurgaru because Kalaturu, with my computer being down, not being able to do enough research that I'd really, really like to do on it to actually come up with each little section of the word or the name itself to get its meaning, get its hidden secret meaning. Kurgaru. Kur, you see the connection to the mountain of sunset of the underworld. And then R, the plow or the scythe. So it represents the harvesting of the underworld. And then Ru would have a meaning which ties in the whole word. Like I said, I've really been wanting to do this. There are so many details, and you have to know these things to truly get everything out of the system that's actually there. Because I've said it time and time again, the Simon Necronomicon is freaking awesome if you can actually understand it, if you can actually delve into it, get the secret meanings from it, so forth and so on. And this is just one of those things. Like with Firik and Pirik of Gid, they refer to as Firik of Gid, but Pirik is also of Gid because Firik and Pirik are like twins. They're like twin serpents, okay? And that's where that came into being, was that they then represent in what today's time would be known as the Kundalini, however you wish to pronounce it. This was the ancients' way of describing the Kundalini. And of course, Gid meaning the central column, the line that connects the 7 chakras of the 7 gates. Tell me that ain't cool shit. But getting back into the Kurgaru and Kalaturu. So Kurgaru represents the grain, hence the food of life. Because here's also another thing where it comes into, and this goes back in agricultural, is that when the seed was planted, the digging up of the earth, get it into the underworld. Now you understand Kurgaru, the Kur, the underworld, and R being the plow sign. Now you get it. So it's the tilling of the earth. And by seed being planted, crops would grow, people would be fed. Now, on to Kalaturu. Kalaturu represents the spirit of the seas, the rain, the water of life. I think that this is most interesting because Enki, being master of the waters, and that this was one of the beings that he created, Kalaturu. Kalaturu, in this sense, would then actually represent the rain. Because, see, it's not enough to plant seeds, you also have to water them. Well, yeah, they had irrigation and all this other stuff, and and that could be symbolic as well. But just in this particular aspect, we're talking about rain. And here in a minute, I'm about to fully go into complete detail about the triple goddess of the Simon Necronomicon. But before I do that, I wanted to explain this. So Kalaturu then is the seed being watered or surrounded by water. Because when it's planted into the ground and it absorbs water, the dirt, the earth around it, and everything else, it then surrounds it, coats it. And then the seed is just pulling in just the amount that it needs so that the spark inside, Kurgaru, come to life. The seed being watered or surrounded by water. Armed with flame, the divine spark or fruit of the spark within. And that's the external of the internal. Now, I realize that me just saying all that might be a bit cryptic, but for those who are actually following along here with me on this one, maybe you can understand it in a better degree than what I can explain it. But hopefully I'm doing a good enough job. I'm not throwing you. Now that we've gone over Kurgaru and Kalaturu, let us go over the triple goddess of the Simon Necronomicon. Who is the triple goddess? Well, like in low magic or witchcraft, you have, the triple goddess, which is Maiden, Mother, Crone, right? Cool. We're not going to divide them in their age like youth, adult, and old age. Because the ancients had a much more simpler way of looking at it than dividing it in the different stages of life. Because they themselves held themselves to this degree, but they did not impart upon the gods themselves the lower nature that they as humans dealt with themselves, because they saw the gods as immortal, as ever living. Therefore, there would have been no youth, adult, old person. Although later on, the idea of their old gods meaning that, they were way before, the ancestors' worshipped. But, so the triple goddess in this sense is Ishtar, queen of heaven over the stars, Inanna, who was seen as the earth itself, Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, and all three were the same being, the same goddess. Different names representing the different aspects, but the exact same goddess. Now, I call this the grain mysteries, and I can thank a lot of resources for helping me come to terms to understand this maybe in a deeper, better level. Forgive me while I go over my notes, reading them off my notes, and then I will go into personal detail. So, Inanna, queen of heaven, or Ishtar, queen of heaven. Wow, I so messed that up. Okay. Inanna, queen of heaven, represents the earth during spring, summer, fall, winter, where she provides for her people. Represented by the seed, the plant, then the grain. Did you see that? The seed, the plant, and the grain. So you can think of the seed as being the possibility. You see that would be considered Ishtar, the light shining. The plant, meaning it is budded, it has taken root, as Inanna. And then the grain, where the plant has already been cut down and harvested, Ereshkigal. Now, this is overseen by the Big Dipper or the scythe. The beloved of Enki provided the water by way of rain. During the winter months, she, being the grain, dies and enters the underworld, where Ereshkigal, representing the barren earth, the phase where all things die and go into the earth. For a time she is mourned, and by way of the passing of winter back into spring, planting and watering renews the cycle, and she comes from the underworld and ascends again. This cycle is symbolic in the sense it represents conception, birth, life, death. Now, I wish to go more into that just a little bit if I can. Maybe I won't totally screw this up, because this is a rather deep subject and really hard to explain. Another one of those things. So it doesn't matter whether you see it as Ishtar, Inanna, or Ereshkigal. My point was being this right here. The goddess representing the earth, like they do in witchcraft and they do in other things, whether you see it as Gaia or whatever. But they saw the earth itself as the mother, as the goddess itself. This takes you back to the concept of Tiamat. Her body was used to create the heavens and the earth, create the firmaments, and so forth and so on. Once again, we see this goddess aspect being given form. Hence, force and form of high magic. Force being the masculine active, form being the feminine creative, that which exists. So in this sense, the earth is the goddess going through cycles due to this change of seasons. In the spring, the seed is planted. In the summer, it grows. In the fall, it is harvested. In the winter, the earth becomes barren, dead. Nothing grows. This is how it equates to Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld. Inanna is none other than Ereshkigal. She is Ereshkigal in the winter of the year, during the death season, where there's no crops, no harvest. This was the night of this was the true night. Was when there was no plants, nothing like this. If they didn't harvest and save the stuff to make it through the winter or through even bad years without the lack of rain and so forth and so on, the people would starve and die. This is where the concept of worshiping nature deities came from. This exact same thing. Their gods and goddesses were real to them in the sense that they represented the earth that gave food, that gave life to the people, to the sky, to the rain that fell. Day being separated, the hot part of the day, which gave the life to the plants, which gave life to the animals and to the people. To the nighttime, time of rest, they slept, healed, so forth and so on. No different than winter, as death actually represents a period of rest. The earth would rest. The goddess was resting, sleeping in the underworld. You see, this is how this came to be. Now, there are other details in the Necronomicon concerning Dumazid. And Dumazid was the consort of Inanna. Now, in the story, she sacrificed him to take her place in the underworld. What do we take from that? Where do we go with that? Well, in the Simon Necronomicon, where you look at the sun as being Shamash Udu, Dumazid was like a very young sun god to them. Like you imagine before Shamash being the sun god, imagine that Dumazid was like a son or child of, so forth, so on, however you wish to look at this. Now, I'm not speaking fact, okay? This is me just talking out thoughts on this, okay? So, Dumazid would then represent the season that allowed change to occur. Like, for example, during the winter months, it's colder, the sun's further away. Do you see? That is Dumazid having been sacrificed into the underworld. And it was a religious practice that the people would mourn Dumuzi having died. In religious practices, that was a thing, that was a sign of, fear that the sun would never shine again, that the earth would not grow plants again, that it would, that it would not sustain life. It wasn't necessarily a thing of fear, but it kind of was and it kind of wasn't. It was a form of fear, of hope, of anticipation. Kind of like the ancient Mayans, thinking the sun would just quit burning one day. And so they'd give sacrifice to it so that it would rise again anew. Well, these people weren't quite like that, but there was a fear then that what if? What if the sun quit shining? What if the sun one day did not rise? And these fears were a part of their cultural inheritance in their belief systems and in their practices and in their everyday life. And so, in this sense, they would mourn Dumuzi, which is in a sense of asking Ereshkigal to give him back to the people. And remember, Ereshkigal was none other than the same Inanna, but it was Inanna as death. Inanna as the barren mother. The hag, if you will, if you're thinking of this in a witchcraft manner. And so in this, it's no different than other stories of other traditions, like in the Norse traditions, so forth and so on, of, wanting Balder back, from hell's embrace. And in this one, it's, wanting Dumuzi back from a Rishkagol so that life could continue and the cycle would go on and that the people would survive for another year. Well, y'all, I have made this as long, twisting as possible. I apologize if it made no sense. I hope it did, though, and I hope, you get some kind of idea. Keep an eye out. I will be doing a knowledge lecture probably in a day or so. And I know I'm really behind on the knowledge lectures. Forgive me for that. I've had a lot of things going on in my life. Got new glasses finally, so I can actually see better. So forth and so on. Taking care of my physical health, getting business took care of on a personal level in my own life, and going through my own personal practices and studies and research and stuff like that, and trying to put material worth fucking listening to on here. So with that being said and done, I wish each and every single one of you peace, blessings, and power.